Thanks to XREAL for sponsoring this video. Apple showed the world what's possible in AR with the Vision Pro. But at the same time, they also showed us that the tech to pull it off isn't quite ready for prime time. At $3,500, the Vision Pro is well out of reach for most people, and due to the sheer size and weight of the thing, it's not something that you want to wear for more than 30 minutes at a time. That's why whenever someone asks me about the Vision Pro, wanting that big movie theater experience, I end up pointing them to something like these instead. This is the XREAL Air 2 Pro, which not only gives you a big 130-inch screen anywhere you go, but because of its relatively small and light form factor, it's actually comfortable enough to wear for hours. And unlike the Vision Pro, they're not insanely expensive. The Air 2 Pros with their electrochromic dimming come in at $450, while the original XREAL Airs, which we did a whole video on previously, are now available for as little as $300. Now, that being said, I want to be clear that these are not the same thing as the Vision Pro. They're completely different devices, and the glasses by themselves aren't necessarily a perfect solution either. When you plug them into an iPhone, they're limited to being just a big screen on your face with like no head tracking or 0 degrees of freedom. And while you do get more of an AR experience on supported Android phones where you can keep the interface pinned in 3D space, due to the limitations of Android itself, where you can't run apps within third-party apps, the experience is limited to just the stuff that XREAL can build themselves, which, so far hasn't been very much. But today, we're taking a look at something that changes all of that in the XREAL Beam Pro, what they describe as their dedicated spatial computing device, which gets past the limitations of running on third-party hardware and unlocks the potential of the glasses, letting you use millions of Android apps in a fully head-tracked 3D environment, while also giving you extra functionality like being able to run 2 apps side by side. Now, at first glance, the Beam Pro looks a lot like a phone. It's got a 6.5-inch 90Hz display, it has a 4,300 mAh battery, and it runs on Android 14. But technically, it's not a phone. You can't actually make phone calls on it, and when you take a closer look, you can tell that it's different. There are 2 USB-C ports at the bottom, so you can connect to the glasses and charge the device at the same time. There's a micro SD slot that supports up to 1 TB cards for downloading offline content. There's a dedicated action button on the right, letting you quickly switch between the body anchor and follow modes. And then on the back, you have these wildly spaced out 3D cameras that give you stronger depth effects than what you get on the iPhone 15 Pro, since that 50mm gap here is a lot closer to the distance between your eyes. We'll talk about that more in a bit, but the first thing that happens when you plug in the glasses into the Beam Pro is you get launched into the new Nebula OS. And right off the bat, you can see how things look different from the Nebula app. The UI has this nice grid of icons that you can swipe through. It reminds me of the Vision Pro's UI, except for instead of using your hands and eyes to control it, you use the Beam Pro, with it acting like a laser pointer, with the touchscreen letting you swipe, tap, and even type with a full keyboard. As you can see, you get all of Google's apps, streaming apps like Netflix, Disney+, and HBO, and nearly any other app you can think of, from Amazon to Microsoft Word. And what's cool is you don't even have to take the glasses off to install apps separately. You can install any of the millions of Android apps right through that AR interface, which truly makes this feel like a standalone experience. Apps kind of work like you'd expect them to, with tap and swipe gestures, and it's a pretty intuitive experience since it works like it does on a phone. Although some games do run into issues if they require more advanced controls. You can display windows in both portrait and landscape modes, and you can resize and reposition them any which way you want. There are 2 tracking modes that you can toggle between, with the first being body anchor, where you can pin apps in 3D space, so if you look away, the app will actually stay exactly where you left it, which to me makes it feel more natural. And then there's the smooth follow mode, where you can have everything always right in front of you, but without any of the micro vibrations or shake. I really like how you can run apps side by side. It's limited to 2 apps for right now. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but either way, it's really cool, and it means that if you connect a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, you can technically do some light office work in here, which could be useful in situations like when you're traveling. Now, it's worth noting that when you run apps side by side, they're not both in view simultaneously like you're seeing in these screen recordings. The field of view on the glasses is 46 degrees, which, while big enough to simulate like a 201-inch screen from 6 feet away, it isn't wide enough to fit everything you have open in view at once. It basically crops as you move your head back and forth, so it's not the full immersive experience you get on the Vision Pro, where the wider field of view on the Vision Pro lets you get everything in view, but I still think it's perfectly usable since you tend to turn your head toward whatever you want to focus on anyway. And because you can see the real world through the glasses instead of relying on a camera or on the screens, you don't really need that wide field of view anywhere near as much. And the good news is that the micro OLED displays on the Air 2 Pros are excellent. They have a 1080p resolution per eye, which with the 46-degree field of view gives you 49 pixels per degree. So it's super sharp and bright with 500 nits of incoming brightness to the eye. And compared to the last generation, there are almost no reflections, especially with the new light seal that extends out at the bottom. The built-in speakers on here are fine. They get loud enough and they do a good job at keeping your audio private, but if you really want to complement that big screen experience when you're watching a movie or when you're gaming with a Bluetooth controller and like with it working with Xbox Cloud Gaming, I would use it with a pair of really good earbuds. It really helps take that experience to the next level. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, why couldn't XREAL just make all of this work with your phone instead of making a separate device? Like, why do you need the Beam Pro? And I think that's a good question. I was wondering the same thing myself, and we already covered the big reason, which is the limitations in Android itself, where it just wasn't possible to get millions of apps in AR without XREAL going out and building their own hardware with system level access. But after using the Beam Pro, I actually think having a separate device might actually lead to a better experience. For one, there's a whole lot of computation required to keep apps fixed in 3D space, which taxes the heck out of the battery. Even with its Snapdragon Spatial companion processor, which I'm assuming is fine-tuned for AR tasks, the Beam Pro's 4300 mAh battery only lasts it 3 to 4 hours in that AR mode. So, having it separate from your phone seems like a good idea. Not to mention that you can charge it and use the glasses at the same time. But there's also other stuff too, like the dedicated action button, the micro SD slot, the way you can totally lock the interface in the controller mode, and of course, these dual 50 megapixel cameras, which let you capture both 3D photos and 3D videos with way stronger depth effects than what you can get on something like the iPhone 15 Pro. Even just taking a 3D photo, it really feels like you're there when you're viewing it back in the photo gallery app. And while it doesn't match the image quality or like the low light performance of the iPhone's camera, the 50mm gap here really does make the 3D videos feel more convincing. And if you want, you can technically use the Beam Pro as a standalone device without the glasses, and while it won't compete with a flagship smartphone obviously, like it doesn't even have a fingerprint scanner, it's still a nice option to have in a pinch, especially with that 90Hz screen. But the main purpose of this thing is to power the AR experience, and it does that really well. The Beam Pro starts at $199 for the 128GB model with 6GB of RAM, and then $249 to get the 256GB model with 8GB of RAM, which, personally, if I could, I would go with the 8GB model since you'll have a little bit more overhead. In terms of the glasses, they start at $299 for the original Airs and then $449 for the Air 2 Pros. And if you're farsighted or nearsighted, XREAL includes a frame where you can have it matched to your prescription. But no matter which way you spec it out, I really like this setup. It feels like the Beam Pro was like that missing link to making these AR glasses feel like AR glasses. And I think it might just be the most consumer-ready AR solution on the market right now, at least when you factor in things like price, comfort, and portability. But anyways, that is it for me in this video. I'll be dropping all the links you need down below in the description. Big thanks to XREAL for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, I'll see you in the very next episode.